Winds for most of us, it should feel a little bit better compared to today, but temperatures still only around 10 to 13 degrees Celsius below par for where we should be. High pressure sticks its way on as we head into the start of the new working week. You'll notice that the isobars just squeezed together a touch more across the southwest, so will turn breezier here on Monday. Some mist and fog patches clearing their way off during the first part of the day as well, but largely dry once again for most. The showers mainly across the far north of Scotland, perhaps pushing into the far southeast as well. Touch more cloud around on Monday compared to the weekend, so the sunshine a bit hazier at times, but generally staying settled through until the middle part of the week.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, very good evening to you. It is 11 o'clock here on GB News. Let's get you up to date with the latest headlines. We start, of course, with the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict. Israel's Prime Minister has warned the next stage in their war against Hamas is coming. Benjamin Netanyahu visited troops stationed on the front line near the Gaza Strip earlier as they prepare for a ground operation. Hundreds of thousands of reservists have been mobilised. Israel's military says it's preparing to attack Hamas by land, sea and air. And Mr Netanyahu has previously pledged to wipe Hamas from the face of the earth. Well, a deadline given for the evacuation of civilians from northern Gaza has now expired. Thousands of people have been fleeing south towards the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. The only route out of Gaza not under Israeli control remains closed, though, because of Israeli airstrikes. A young British girl who's trapped in Gaza says she fears for her life.
I'm really in fear, and every time I just have to have the thought of me dying in a bomb in Gaza. It's not a good thing. And every place I go run away, and I just find bombs and I find dead people, and like maybe one day I'll end up like them, but it's a really scary thing for me.
Well, those who haven't been able to leave Gaza are squeezing into UN schools, hospitals and makeshift shelters as the airstrikes continue. The Palestinian Health Ministry says dozens of people were killed when a convoy of vehicles heading south on a safe route yesterday was targeted. Gaza authorities say more than 2,200 people have been killed, a quarter of them children, and nearly 10,000 people wounded. There have also been reports of exchanges of fire in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, that's in southwestern Syria, and also with Hezbollah at the border with Lebanon. Hezbollah funded by Iran. There's been response from Iran tonight. They say would be far-reaching consequences if Israel's war crimes and genocide are not stopped immediately. Tens of thousands of people gathered for pro-Palestinian demonstrations across the UK earlier as the conflict escalates. More than 1,000... More than 1,000 officers were deployed in London, with police saying anyone showing support for Hamas may face arrest. 7 people were detained. Demonstrators carried flags and flares and chanted pro-Palestinian slogans, urging world leaders to condemn Israel's actions.
You know, what's happened in Israel is tragic, but what's happening in Gaza now is beyond description. I think it shows the depth of feeling of the British public. There are people from absolutely every type of skin color, creed, political persuasion. It's amazing.
And the Qatari banker Sheikh Yassim has withdrawn from the process to buy Manchester United. The billionaire's offer of around £5 billion was for 100% of the club. He also pledged further funding for infrastructure projects and also to clear debt. The British businessman, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, is now the only other declared bidder, and he's understood to be working on a 25% stake, which would see the American Glazer family retain majority control of the club. That is it for the moment from me. We'll be back with more later on and tomorrow, but now it's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Nick Dixon, taking you through tomorrow's top stories for the next hour. And I'm joined by dangerous extremist Leo Kearse. There he is. And the suspiciously reasonable Steve N. Allen. How are you doing? This is good. This is like all three of us host. This is like a sort of super group. You know what it's like? It's like when we used to do comedy clubs, like the top clubs, which I did, and they'd all say, everyone's a headliner tonight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you were thinking the middle guy isn't really.
Yeah,
but
the guy sitting in the host chair is the host.
But we're all potentially hosts, you see what I'm saying?
But like the travelling Wilburys of whatever this is, talking about newspapers.
We're that old.
Yeah.
Did everyone get that reference? I'm just thinking, I hope they get that at home.
I think demographically, it's a safe bet.
Who would you want to be?
Roy.
I'll go with Tom Petty. That leaves Leo as Jeff Lynne, the one that no one was bothered about. Yeah, all right. All right. Great banter. Great banter if you're about 60 years old. So let's have a quick look at the front pages. So the Mail on Sunday has You Ghouls, which is about the pro-Palestine marches today and the shocking imagery therein. The Sunday Telegraph has Israel set to hit Hamas from land, sea and air. The Observer has Israel warns fleeing Gazans the next stage is coming. The Sunday Express, PM, we stand by Israel always. The Sun on Sunday, Prem A's secret sex party legal gag. And the Daily Star, Apocalypse Nout, which is something to do with zombies and Leeds. And those were your front pages. So let's start with the Mail on Sunday, Leo. What are they going with?
So they've got You Ghouls. They're talking about the pro-Palestinian marches. And they've got a picture of 2 women among the thousands on the pro-Palestine march in London brazenly revel in the massacre of dozens of young Israelis by paragliding Hamas terrorists. So why didn't the police stop them? And that's a good question, because the police announced that anyone showing support for Hamas could face arrest. And this is clearly, showing absolute support for some of the worst crimes that Hamas committed. So the the paragliders paraglided out of Gaza and into the music festival, where around 260 people were massacred, and they were out having, it was a pro-peace music festival. Somebody compared it to Glastonbury, but no, this was actually a tragic event. And yes, other pro-Palestine protests have been turning ugly as supporters throw bottles and flares at the police in Trafalgar Square, with 7 arrested and thousands more march in Manchester, Newcastle, Bristol and Glasgow. And there is a sign, perhaps, of the public mood turning. I think there was this enormous wave of revulsion at the shocking atrocities committed by Hamas last weekend, but now we've seen, the IDF have been bombing Gaza, and we've seen the death toll, the civilian death toll, babies being carried out of the rubble there. It's been horrific. And there's also signs. I mean, they bombed a convoy that was carrying people, because they told people to leave the north of Gaza, so people were on the roads trying to get out. And there's a truck that was obviously civilians, and it got bombed. 70 died. And you've got to wonder, if they didn't have the intelligence to see the Hamas attack coming, how have they got the intelligence to know which buildings to destroy? That's, what I don't understand. Plus, Hamas are trying to keep civilians in the buildings because they want as many dead as possible for their own propaganda means.
Yeah, but what about this march day? The question here on the Mail is, why didn't the police stop them? Can they stop this many people? What are they going to do about it?
So that's a good point, actually, looking at the numbers side of it. Do you know the way it's written in the Mail seems well balanced? And whenever I notice that, I start to double check. But when they say yesterday's march for Palestine was never supposed to be a celebration of slaughter, but it was a day when social media's nasty tribalism transferred from screen to street. Exactly. That's the problem here. So it's not about having a protest, a march, whatever. I don't even want to say the word fine, but you know what I mean? You can make an argument as to why you should have the march. But if you are celebrating the acts of terror, that is very different, and I'm sure the police should be stepping in. I don't know, are they doing things like having a picture of a paraglider to give some grey area in the moment? Are you going to arrest people for a picture of a paraglider, which you could argue is something else? I don't know. It seems like...
Yeah, it's tricky. I think the Hamas flag is definitely a line.
That one gives it away.
But yeah, we've got to move on and do the Sunday Telegraph, Steve. What do they have?
Trouble for the BBC, or the BBC Arabic have had to investigate 6 of their reporters for appearing biased. It's a BBC bias story. So of the 6 people that they're investigating, one of the cases is just liking a tweet. Now, that never sits well with me. Judging someone for the tweet they like is often because you can't remember how to bookmark it. But one senior correspondent has made fun of an Israeli relative of the grandmother who was abducted, a joke about inheritance. Another tweet is saying Israel's prestige is crying in the corner. So there's a lot to investigate, to look at the bias, but this is the BBC that's also having to investigate or look at its bias from the other side. The BBC is always accused of bias in a way that disagrees with the person who's making the complaint. And if I can just quickly tell you, there was a lovely meme that went round of the number of complaints the BBC got once. Number 2 on the list was being too pro-Palestine. Number 3 on the list was being too pro-Israel. But number 1 on the list was a complaint about Bake Off, which tells you a lot about our concerns.
That was me, to be fair. But yeah, but to be fair, Steve, yes, I understand it's difficult for the BBC, but this is we're paying the licence fee for this for BBC Arabic, and there are people who describe the October 7th atrocity as a morning of hope on the channel. And, whereas in this country, BBC are in trouble for not using, the word terrorist, which I think is fair enough. But this is outrageous, isn't it?
But, and also in this country, we've seen BBC journalists say that the Israeli army is happy to kill children, which it obviously isn't.
Who said that?
That was my cousin, actually. But, we've got quite differing political views. But yeah, the BBC, and it shows the culture within the BBC that people feel free to say things like this, and they know that they're not going to get into trouble. If anything, they're going to get promoted.
No, I don't know if that is the culture within the entirety of the BBC. But whenever I worked there, I firstly were never told which way to.
They hid it from you because you look like a Nazi.
OK, that might be a good point. But no, other than that, actual experience on the ground floor in the meetings, and my word, there were too many meetings. There was never that sense of all this conspiracy that we all have about, the BBC controls. No, they don't. Maybe they slightly select the people they'll employ, but clearly not in this case for BBC Arabic.
Having been in it, you're saying it's more a case of incompetence.
It was when I was there. It definitely was during the hours I broadcast.
That's what you were saying. All right, let's have a look at the Sunday Express, Leo. What have they got?
So the Sunday Express has Rishi Sunak saying, "We stand by Israel always." So, and this is interesting. It's quite a contrast as Corbyn joins thousands of Brits marching in support of Palestinians just a week after Hamas butchered Jews. Sunak gives this message that he's standing behind Israel. And I think it's interesting that so many Brits, so many leftists like Jeremy Corbyn, all the sort of all the people that have the pride flags and all that sort of stuff are marching for Hamas, for Palestine, for people who would butcher them and throw them off buildings. You know, you've got feminists marching for the most misogynist people in the world. You've got these leftists marching for people who are essentially the most barbaric medieval barbarians in the world. And I'm talking about Hamas there, although they are elected by Palestinians. Whereas Rishi Sunak, on the other hand, stands for civilization and freedom and democracy. Because bear in mind, Israel, for all these people saying, "Oh, Palestine must be free," Israel is the only free and democratic country with equal rights in the Middle East.
Yeah, it is quite disturbing thing that Corbyn got semi-near being Prime Minister, given his views. And I did see a piece the other day that 61% feel that Starmer has dealt with anti-Semitism in the party. So he does seem to have put that behind him. And, of course, Sunak has to support Israel. I think I don't see what else is he going to do. It's the obvious stance. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, and I suppose that's what we want to hear our Prime Minister say as well, to support those who are the victim of terrorism, which is, I believe, the quote in there. That's the kind of words you want to hear. Look, the left has a problem, doesn't it? And in fact, that David Baddiel documentary, I remember watching.
We radicalised you.
Yeah, Steve getting red pilled.
There's part of the left that has a problem. Well, not necessarily the Starmer left. 60-something% think he's dealt with it. Depending on where you position yourself. No, it reminds me of what David Baddiel was saying in that documentary about there's a group of people who think that they are spending their entire life fighting racism, and somehow through their brain slips through one group that they think, yeah, we're not them.
Yeah,
and that's the seed now, and it's coming up into the ways in which they're protesting this.
Yeah, and it's baked into their decolonisation agenda and ideology, which is just horrific. But let's have a quick look at The Sun, Steve.
Prem, a secret sex party legal gag. It's one of those tabloid headlines where I don't even know if any of these are a verb. It's difficult to work out if it's a sentence. I'm surprised these are still stories. Last week there was another one as well. We've not had these for years. Like the Sunday newspapers always used to be footballer sleeps with a model, and we were shocked somehow, which I think is one of the reasons why people become footballers and models become models. They're a perfect fit. I don't know why we're upset.
We were shocked when Wayne Rooney could go out with models. I think that's what it was. I'm sorry, I felt bad. I had to do the joke while feeling bad. It was just right there.
But they've almost they've made it more professional. They've done a bit of Henry Ford on it. They've really sped up the efficiency. Now it's sex parties where you've got to sign some waiver promising that you won't tell anyone.
Yeah.
I don't think it's shocking that models sleep with footballers.
All right, well, we've got to move on, unless you've got something amazing, Leo, in like 10 seconds.
No, it's just, I mean, why would you hide it? Unless they're married, like, why would you hide this? This is just going to get you credibility and kudos. Why pay lawyers? Unless the lawyers are sleeping with you as well.
We'll probably find out in due course. But that is it for part one. But coming up, how to solve the small boats crisis or not, and the glitter bomb bounce. See you in 2 minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Nick Dixon, still here with Leo Kearse and Steve N. Allen, Headliners legends. Do you still go with the N?
Yeah, why not?
Cool.
I know all the other Stephen Allens are either dead or retired, but I'm still going with it.
Because you could retire it, but keep it for now. Got your brand. Let's do the Sunday Telegraph then. And finally, we have the people we need to fix the small boats crisis. Consultants, Leo.
Now, don't laugh, Nick. Consultants fulfil a valuable role in society, but the Home Office is spending loads on small boats crisis consultants. In fact, it's gone up 10 times, and they're now spending £87 million in 6 months without any substantial improvements. That definitely sounds like consultants to me. I used to be a consultant in public sector management at the Foreign Office, and
I think I technically still am here. This is kind of what my role as a consultant.
But yeah, this is a drop in the ocean of the £3 billion a year that's spent on the small boats, accommodation and all the rest of them, and making sure they get here nice and safely and get a life jacket. Some of the money that the consultancy fees are being spent on is for immigration and borders technology, delivering small boats arrivals, and future borders traffic management. So it doesn't sound like it's actually to stop the small boats. It sounds like it's to sort of process them more efficiently when they're here and get them through the passport queue more quickly.
Yeah, it does sound like that. And also, I'm a bit worried because Starmer today, let's say Labour win, he set out his 5-point whatever it was, and it was stuff like nationalised energy, it sounded like, and there was stuff about making it so anyone can achieve anything in the country, which we already have. So that's probably just going to make it harder for everyone. But then he just didn't mention immigration at all. That's what worried me in his 5-point plan. And Sunak didn't mention it in his conference speech or Labour, so I'm just like, who's going to actually get a hold of this? The Tories are just paying loads of useless consultants. Labour don't even have it on their agenda. But sorry, Steve, that was a bit of a rant. What do you think?
No, well, I think the only thing that the Tories could do is to have an aim that they will fail, but manage to blame the failure on lefty groups. And I think a phrase like "stop the boats," which implies 100% stopping, so it's guaranteed to fail. There's no way you could achieve that. As long as you're saying it loads and then blame the lefties for its failure. Look, you can argue this is Keynesian economics. The idea of employing people to do pointless work, that's what they've managed to do. That's where this 87 million's back in the economy now. At least he's helping that in some way. Helping inflation, of course, that's what it'll do. But yeah, I mean, why not get these consultants to process more people, shift the backlog and save some money on hotel bills?
But that's not really solving the problem, because if we process the people, we're actually just incentivising more people to come.
What's definitely not solving the problem is having 87 million spent on people coming up with ideas that have done nothing.
Yeah, I mean, so far, and we know, I mean, the entirety of the public sector is a Keynesian stimulus. But yeah, I mean, this just shows, I mean, Steve mentioned that, they can blame it on lefties, but it actually is lefties' fault. It's all the courts, the human rights lawyers, the NGOs, the Home Office itself, this woke blob that think they've got the right ideas. And they know better than all the people in the UK who've, at every point when they've been asked, they've said, no, we don't want like massive levels of uncontrolled immigration. They're overriding that and ensuring it happens.
I like the phrase Keynesian stimulus. I can't say it, but I like that high-level intellectual stuff on GB News. And good point about the boats.
Sexy.
When he says stop the boats it is vague, he could mean power boats on Windermere, which is a real problem. Let's do the Observer now with a story about the glitter bomb bounce. But surprisingly for the Observer, it's not about drag queens twerking in a library, Steve.
It's about Keir Starmer enjoys glitter bomb bounce in polls. Calm yourself, though. Don't overanalyse it, because this is simply people have seen Keir Starmer mentioned in the news. That's what's happened, isn't it? I mean, this is how our brains work. If you take any of the people who now scoring more highly in the polls and say, oh, yeah, since the conference, what other policies do you know he's got? Oh, taking his jacket off when he gets beglittered. And that worked really well, didn't it? That was a great metaphor. So he could take his jacket off, roll up his sleeves and say, I'll roll up my sleeves and get the job done. It was a perfect. I mean,
also, it didn't look too chicken when it happened. You know, some people would have cowered, and he sort of stood there and didn't do that.
It went suspiciously well for him, didn't it? And now he's got this bounce. I'm not saying it's conspiracy, but his shirt was already like, I'm rolling up my sleeves and getting on with the job, you know. And the fact that, you know, it was just perfect for... And it wasn't anything that made him look bad like a cream pie. It was glitter that actually made him look better. It's suspicious, isn't it? That's all I'm saying.
Well, no, don't give him too much credit, though. I think the whole article almost gives him too much credit, because if he wins the next election, he should send a thank you basket to Rishi Sunak for, I mean, cancelling HS2 in Manchester. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Although the greatest gap in the polls between Tories and Labour was like 3 days before Liz Truss resigned. So we should also send her something, shouldn't we?
Yeah, Sunak essentially went, you know that thing you don't care about? I've cancelled it. It's like, you've not mentioned immigration. You know, but this was perfect for Starmer as well, because he could talk about power, not protest. Yeah. It seemed like he was tough on Just Stop Oil. But anyway, go on.
Well, just to sort of pour some water on Steve's jubilation, I mean, Starmer is what? His net approval rating is like 35%. Tony Blair had an approval rating of 93%. Wow. So in 1997. So, I mean, but like Steve says, this isn't an election that Labour will win. This is an election that the Tories will lose.
That's it, exactly. And there was another story today of an insider apparently saying, don't F it up, is the official policy of Labour. And I've also heard it described as carrying a Ming vase. You just got to not drop it. Yeah. It's actually not as easy as you think, because it kind of reminds me, sorry, you're both not into football, but it's like a second leg of a European football match. You're ahead from the first leg. In the second one, you just have to not lose. Right. It's actually quite hard to play not to lose. So they could actually mess it up a bit. What do you think?
I don't understand football, but I presume Ming vases must be easy to drop, because there aren't many of them around, and that's why they're worth a lot.
Exactly. You don't see them anymore. That means Labour will lose. So let's do the Observer again with a story about the success of multiculturalism, Leo. That was an intro by Leo Kirst there. Poor Leo Kirst.
So the Louvre in Paris, which is the art museum where they've got the Mona Lisa, it evacuated its staff and visitors after receiving a written bomb threat. So the warning on Saturday came as France is on its highest alert for terrorist attacks after the killing of a teacher by a suspected radical Islamist in the north of the country on Friday. I like how they say suspected radical Islamist. I mean, he was on a watch list. He was a Chechen Muslim, and he screamed Allah Akbar as he did it.
Still waiting for confirmation.
He might be Amish, but yeah, we're not sure. But yeah, and they've got 7,000 troops being deployed across the country to deal with it. I mean, if only there was something that Western Europe could do to stop the flow of Islamists into the country. I mean, people just have to be able to come from Chechnya, apparently.
I know, it is worrying, because I was speaking to a member of what sometimes gets called the Blob the other day, and they were calling Suella Braverman inhuman or inhumane or both. They obviously think both. What bothers me about that is that 66% of this country, when all Brits are polled, say that immigration is now an existential threat to the country and to the West. So that's actually not an extreme position. You can't rule out 2/3 of the British public as just inhuman. But is that the problem, Steve, or is it about a specific subset within Islam that we need to somehow tackle specifically?
Well, it's all protesters having problems with museums. That's definitely a thread that I've noticed. Right. Just Stop Oil ruining some artwork, and now the Louvre. I mean, they're really trying to attack us on the classic works of art. That's how you'd bring down the West, isn't it? If you stop us. If you go there anyway, you can't see the Mona Lisa. Everyone says, "Oh, it's got the Mona Lisa." It's the tiniest thing you've ever seen. It's miles away, and it's got tourists with their phones in front of it.
You elided my right-wing agitation with humour. That was clever.
Also, up until I think about 1970, it wasn't even a famous painting. Nobody really cared about it, and then it got stolen. Something happened to give it all this PR, and now it's the most famous painting and the best painting, apparently.
Yeah, it's rubbish. Well, that's the point.
But so is unfettered immigration. So is no border control.
Good point. Most art's rubbish, isn't it? Except like really good films. They don't really count.
I know this, I don't want to slow you down, but really quickly, I think the Louvre is a great lesson on how religion might need re-evaluating. The top levels, everyone goes and looks at these works of art inspired by religion. It's so sombre. They walk down to the 2 levels at the bottom and go, look at these idiots. They thought there was a god of thunder. And yet somehow I don't think there's any kind of comparison there.
Yeah, well, that was a much more intellectual point than mine. That was art is rubbish. You were right to interrupt me during that. Let's do the Sunday Express with a story about why the United States needs an extremely powerful weapon. Sounds like it was written by Dr. Evil, Steve.
Yes, I should do this with a little pinky finger up there. US needs extremely powerful weapon to stay superior global power as threats multiply. Don't get too excited about this. I mean, it's got all the right people involved. Its former Joint Chiefs Chair, General Mark Milley, says this, we need an impressive weapon. And you think, was this going to be like a laser? You can bounce off the moon and manage to zap someone off around the Earth. It's AI. It's just another AI story. It's going to get good at planning. Great, that's what we're going to get. Apparently, it will be good at what they call OODA, which is Observe, Orient, Decide and Act. It seems like a terrible acronym. I don't know why they don't go for, like, look, gather forces, balance options, take action, LGB... OK, no, fair enough.
Anything on this, Leo? AI?
Well, the US has got an extremely powerful weapon, or is about to have an extremely powerful weapon. Donald Trump. Nobody dares do anything with Donald Trump. You don't need AI when you've got Donald Trump with, his shaky anger.
You don't need I when you've got Donald Trump.
Donald.
But we've seen this sort of future scoping about what weaponry we're going to need in the past, and it turns out we don't need. The wars of the future weren't fought on, in computer hubs and all the rest of it. What are you pointing at?
Do you
need to get on?
Yeah.
Right.
You should highlight my subtle.
No, it's good.
You should always highlight them in case the viewer doesn't know, to make me look bad. You should always do that, I think.
Yeah, well, you should keep doing them when I'm talking.
They should cut to you when you're actually doing this.
It doesn't mean
that
stop
helps.
immediately. It means gently come to a close. But what you went for is highlight it to the viewer, and it's all right.
Just a vague simulation of a
It's quite tough when there's 3
conversation.
hosts on, because even when they're not hosting, they're angling to get back in the host chair by any means possible. Let's quickly do The Sun. And the BBC have taken impartiality to absurd levels by refusing to call Hamas terrorists. But apparently it's not enough for some people, Leo.
So pro-Palestinian group spattered BBC studios with red paint and accused broadcaster of supporting Israeli apartheid. They sent this tweet saying, spreading the occupation's lies and manufacturing consent for Israel's war crimes means that you have Palestinian blood in your hands. Shut BBC down. I mean, they've got the same feeling as me, but for different reasons. So they're angry that the BBC is pro-Israel, but just yesterday or a couple of days ago, the broadcaster was slammed for refusing to label Hamas as terrorists. And John Simpson, the veteran reporter, came out and said, calling someone a terrorist means you're taking sides. It's like, take sides against Hamas? Oh, we can't have that, John.
Yeah, pretty ridiculous. Steve, you used to work at BBC. What do you think?
Their argument as to why they don't seems no longer applicable. It's a traditional way that they try to never have the voice of the BBC saying something. But you know what? When a group has been called a terrorist group by the government, by the king gets involved, you could do it. I don't see how it would ruin their broadcasting if they did.
Yeah, so this attack seemed very harsh to me. And they talked about manufacturing consent, which is a Chomsky book, so you can see where they're coming from. The only thing I like was that they said hashtag shut down BBC. So, they got a point there. I don't agree with them throwing paint on stuff, but I'm into that bit. Anyway, that's all we have time for in part 2. But coming up, the Australian referendum, the New Zealand election, the BBC gets in trouble over tasers, and more weaponised autism from Leo Kerr. See you in a minute.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. Let's get straight into it with the eye. And Australia has settled an important vote by referendum, which, as we know, is the best way to bring a country together, Steve.
Australia rejects recognising Aboriginal people in constitution after historic Indigenous voice referendum. They do way more referenda than we do, and actually the way in which they do it, where you have to get a majority and a majority of the areas voting for it, it makes it harder to get. They get very few yeses, so we should be less surprised by this. But the vague aim of it was to try and get the nation's constitution to be amended to enshrine mechanisms to help Indigenous people. The vague aim was liked in the polls early on. So do you like the goal of this? People going like, yeah. Then when you got closer and closer to it, the lack of detail became the problem. The No campaign ran a really interesting angle of kind of saying, do you know what it will be like if you say yes? If you don't, then say no. The Remain vote in this country must look at that and think, oh, it was staring us in the face. Why did we not say that? Yeah, I mean, obviously, the side that lost seemed very upset about this. There are other ways to achieve the same social equality if you wanted it without trying to enshrine it in a constitution. And they never get their referendums voted through. Their system has loads of no's in it.
Yeah, and it's being reported in The Guardian and across the media as if they're rejecting Aboriginal rights, and that's not what's happening at all. This was an incredibly flawed piece of legislation that, you know, like Steve says, wasn't defined. It didn't say what it was going to do. It just said we're going to make sure that, you know, Aboriginal people have a say in all parts of government. So that means that, you know, any building or farming or any economic activity, basically any matters of government, would have to be run past a panel of Aboriginal people, and anybody could say, oh, my ancestors saw a rainbow here, and so you can't do anything there. It could have stymied all economic activity. It could have led to huge amounts of corruption, and it was incredibly divisive because it's sort of separating Aboriginals from the rest of the people. And let's face it, white Australians are also. I mean, what are they if they're not native to America? Is Australia not their? They're born in Australia. Is Australia not their land as well? I think it's very anti-immigration.
You meant Australia, not America. I was thinking Australia's a native to America. That's why I was like, this is a new angle I haven't heard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not an expert, but you know what I mean? Okay. All right, well, I thought it was well covered. Let's do The Observer now with a story about the far right and white supremacy. So all we can say for sure is that it actually will not involve the far right or white supremacy. I wrote these with The Guardian initially. It works so much better, that joke, but you get the idea.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. So London police defy ban on badges linked to far right and white supremacy. But bear in mind, this is The Guardian, so they don't mean far right and white supremacy at all. So it's this thin blue line badge that police wear to honour fallen comrades, so people who've died, defending us from violent criminals. It seems like a appropriate thing for the police to wear instead of pride flags and Black Lives Matter badges or whatever. And it also seems, I can't see how anybody would find this problematic. I mean, the Pride Progress flag celebrates the sort of sterilisation and mutilation of children. Taking the knee is, you're echoing an organisation that celebrates Hamas. So this is how the left censors and neuters good movements. They've got, this thing that's celebrating or paying respects to fallen police officers, and they say, no, that's racist. Oh, look, no, this racist person wore that, so you can't. So the whole movement is stymied. Also in the same article, they say the Celtic cross is racist, which is absolute nonsense. There's been Celtic crosses in Scotland since like medieval times when there weren't any black people. So how could we be racist? Were we racist? We invented racism.
Yeah.
We anticipated.
Yeah,
we anticipated black
very
people.
prescient bigots. So yeah, I mean, you're right. And the fact that the officers are wearing it despite Mark Rowley banning it, they obviously feel very strongly about it because it's about fallen officers. Yeah, just because a couple of nutters have worn it doesn't ruin it. And as you say, they represent other causes, so that's not even consistent, LGBTQ, etc. And I don't like this idea of like, and in the last paragraph, they allow for, oh, maybe it's about fallen officers. You could say that BLM was similar in football, where they said, oh, it's about racism. It's not our fault that it's associated with other things. But that doesn't work because BLM was explicitly from the start an extremist organisation that said we want to destroy the nuclear family, etc. This was a good thing that was then taken on by a few other people, as I understand it. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, when I started reading this, I was thinking, oh, look, if a symbol suddenly becomes synonymous with a bad thing, you update it. Like, yeah, there's a Buddhist cross with some little hooks on the top of each cross that I'd love. Oh, I guess I won't use that anymore. But then I read the whole thing and realised it's actually in America where this symbol is more of a problem. But the one over here has got like it's a Union Jack with a line through it. So we very much made it not the American version, unless the Americans were using the Union Jack one, in which case let's sue for copyright.
Yes, good point. We're importing more of America's cultural nonsense. Let's do the Mirror. And Strictly star Shirley Ballas is in trouble for telling women to carry tasers. But to be fair, given some of the BBC's past presenters, there is a case for it, Steve.
That is good. That is very good. BBC issues urgent apology. That's a shocking phrase, isn't it? Let's get to that in a second. Strictly star Shirley tells all women to carry tasers. But they say issues apology like it's a big deal and there's a lectern. And it's one of those things where, as the host, you just have to go, oh, actually, you shouldn't carry tasers. They're illegal.
Yes, and can I just say, you shouldn't carry tasers.
Exactly. Look, I mean, it's not a massive apology. I mean, you just have to, for Ofcom reasons, say something after someone's spoken. Anyone who's hosted this show when Lewis has been on has had to do that. But my favourite bit is she's apologised as well. Shirley Ballas has apologised. She said, I apologise for my comments. I did not know tasers were illegal in the UK. She got a taser. There's no way she's not. If you're going in her handbag, don't be her.
That was my favourite bit as well. It's like, I didn't realise tasers weren't legal in the UK. And if you'll excuse me, I have to drive home very quickly and get to the skip, unless you want to buy 200 tasers. That's what I took from that. Yep. What do you think, Leo?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what you all said.
Yeah, all right, we nailed the taser story. Let's do this one then. In the Sunday Telegraph, and New Zealand has voted for a Conservative government. Pretty ungrateful after Jacinda Ardern's party gave them all that safety, Leo.
Yeah, another great Antipodean election result. So New Zealand resoundingly chooses Conservative government over Labour. Voters elect for change after 6 years of a Liberal government, led for most of that time by Jacinda Ardern. So it's a dramatic contrast to Labour's landslide victory under Jacinda Ardern just a few years ago in 2020. But obviously since then, we've had lockdown, we've had authoritarian laws coming through, she's anti-free speech. She hammered farmers as well, so she went after, and we've seen politicians brought down by this. They think, the metropolitan elite are all that matters, so they go after farmers. They say, oh, you're emitting too much CO2 or whatever it is. She imposed all these regulations on farmers, and they really pushed back, and people love their farmers because they know that's where the food comes from.
And yeah, it says here very clearly they're not forgiven Ardern for COVID, but it's also about unprecedented spates of crime and cost of living crisis. It's about a lot of things. And I love how charming and quaint, by the way, New Zealand politics is. Chris Hipkins and Christopher Luxon, they're all called Chris. But do we know anything about this candidate, though? Because I was speaking to someone from the sort of more libertarian ACT, I think from the ACT party, and they weren't sure about this guy, saying he doesn't really get much done. Ostensibly, it sounds good to us to have a Conservative, but do you know much about him?
Well, I think a government that doesn't get much done is the perfect government.
Yes, that's a good point. What do you think, Steve?
I wouldn't count your chickens until they've hatched and stuff. This is also a story about fatigue of the current government. So whilst you see in Europe people voting more to the right, It doesn't mean that people are just getting more right-wing. It just means they've been annoyed by the people in charge. It's a shame, in one way, she did want to bring, or the party wanted to bring in the tax on cow bottom burps. And I'd love to see if they had, I'm presuming there's a little thing you put in there that measures it, just whizzes and counts it like a gas meter.
Yeah, it would have been the world's first tax on methane belched and farted by livestock. Wonder why they voted them out. I knew Jacinda jumped the shark when she said, you can now urinate in your friend's house. And you were like, what is this? What is this country? Just dystopian New Zealand. Anyway, I'm glad they got rid of that party. But let's quickly do the Sunday Telegraph. And Labour have been accused of being anti-libertarian and attacking marriage, to which they would probably reply, yeah, ovs, Steve.
So Labour plan for cohabiting laws are anti-libertarian, says former High Court judge. This is Paul Coleridge, who's... the idea of... He said that bringing in a law, like a common law marriage, causes a problem. You've got two issues with it, and I've only got one issue with it. He says it could undermine the concept of marriage. Yeah, whatevs. But the one that I'm more upset about is the fact that if you just live with someone, if it's the law that Labour want to bring in is like the ones in other countries. If you live with someone for 3 years, they just get to own half your stuff, which will mean no one moves in together, and we already don't have enough housing stock. But the flip side is...
Also, it'd be an awkward 3 year, you know, when you get to 2 years and 11 months.
I think that's the best part, though, that it would mean when you're just under 3 years into a relationship, you'd review it. And maybe that is, instead of just staying with someone who's not worth half a house, you'd suddenly think, you know what, let's break up.
I think it's an appalling idea, the idea you just live with someone, the state can suddenly say, well, you owe them loads of money then. You're like, what? I barely knew them. It was a big house. Yeah, it's absurd. The only counterintuitive win is that Christians would, like proper Christians would say you shouldn't move in anyway till marriage, so people just won't live together till marriage. But that is a pretty obscure win I've got from that. What do you think, Leo?
Yeah, I mean, I think why does the state need to get involved? And, you know, when you've got a voluntary arrangement between two people, why is the state getting, you know, butting in and being like, no, you need to do it like this? And also, why don't people just get married? It's fun.
Yes, and this is just going to stop them, and it's going to stop them living together at all, and then going straight to marriage, or probably just say you can't move in with me. It's what's going to happen.
Yeah, the whole article does say that if you're not married, you're more likely to break up after like 3 years of relationship, whatever it is. Yeah, because you're comparing breakup with divorce. Of course, you're more likely to break up and just it's fine. There's no paperwork. You don't have to sob for ages. Whereas a divorce, I imagine, takes a bit more effort.
Yes, great point. That is it for part 3. But coming up in the final section, Kevin Spacey has cancelled again an AI teacher and male tampons. See you in a minute.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners for the final section. Let's get into it with The Telegraph. And Kevin Spacey has been cancelled by a West End cinema despite being proven innocent. Tough times for Kevin and for the rule of law, Leo.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So Kevin Spacey's been cancelled by the Prince of Wales cinema just off Leicester Square. He was going to have the world premiere of his first film since being cleared of sex assault charges. But the premiere was scrapped by the Prince of Wales Theatre, cinema, whatever it is, cinema.
Prince Charles in Leicester Square.
Charles.
I've been to it.
Yeah. Prince Charles.
It's shocking.
Cinema.
I mean, they
haven't updated it to King.
Great point. We should cancel them for that. They didn't really...
Well, hang on, they still call it the Elizabeth line. If we're going to start bringing up, are we updating things?
Yeah, but that's fine, because we all love Elizabeth. But
all right.
Look,
sometimes it is late.
Our beloved Queen.
It's Prince Charles.
Yeah, it should be updated. You're right. But what bothered me here is they didn't realise, the cinema didn't realise Kevin Spacey was in the film. Now, as soon as they found out, they said they're horrified and they cancelled it. And this person from the cinema, Greg Lynn, said, when contacted by The Telegraph, said there is no story here. I'm afraid there is, Mr. Lynn. We're covering it right now. You've cancelled someone who's innocent.
He's been exonerated in court, like O.J. Simpson or Bill Cosby. He's completely innocent.
But that's the thing. I mean, sometimes you don't necessarily like these people, like Mason Green with Man United, but there was no charges brought. In this case, he's been proven innocent. So we have to have rule of law, Steve. What do you think?
But there's no legal obligation for a cinema to host a premiere. So if your argument is that it's a legal thing...
No, I'm saying we should recognise the rule of law, or what else can we use?
But then this would be like market forces and individually private-owned businesses get to make decisions... Not that I'm necessarily arguing that point of view.
He's a free market libertarian.
I think free market libertarian is a counter to the argument you've just made about
hang on, but
rule of law.
Let's say, Steve, if you were accused of something that you didn't do, and of course you wouldn't because you're a great guy.
Don't mention that again.
But then if you were completely exonerated in court, and I said, well, I still don't want to work with Steve because of the court case, how is that fair? I mean,
no, it's not fair, but there's no legal requirement for you to be fair to me if I've had an accusation.
I'm not saying there's a legal requirement. I'm saying we have to observe the rule of law if we want to have a good society.
I think there might be laws against restricting somebody's trade based on, your own prejudice. I think...
And if there aren't, we should invent some, because we've got enough other rubbish laws. Why can't we have some good laws?
Yeah, look at somebody... Look at somebody like Craig Charles. As an example, as somebody who's accused, suffered horribly, was held in prison and then completely exonerated.
But this story does not mention law because they've not broken a law. So even though you can come up with laws against your prejudice stopping someone's business happening, this cinema has not broken the law. This story isn't even trying to say that. What it's saying is that it's not being fair in the way that it deals with someone who's been found innocent. But so no one's bringing law into it until...
Well, what other things are not illegal to do in this cinema? Can I go in there and do a poo on the floor?
It's a great point. We'll investigate that tomorrow night. Yeah. But for now, let's do the Mail. And if there's one issue that is worth protesting during these dark times, it's the lack of tampons in the male bathroom, Steve.
Finally, Clemson University students march on campus after tampons were quietly removed from the men's bathroom. So now we're arguing about male spaces and the woke mob erasing men. Finally, we get involved in this. I felt left out for a bit. Regardless of how you present your gender, no one wants to go in the men's toilets. Why would you not go in the ladies? Do you like wet shoes? What's wrong with you? But so there's a protest. According to the group that arranged the protest, these dispensers were vandalised first before being removed. So, the other flip side would be there's a machine in the gents you don't use. For many men, that is true of the condom machine.
Yeah.
Keep wishing. You'll get there one day.
And I think like the trans men, so people who are born female and then transition to being men, don't really present a threat to men in the same way that biological males would present a threat to females. So yeah, I don't really understand the outrage over this unless they're worried it sort of encourages the equivalent to happen in female bathrooms.
Well, it's nonsense, isn't it? They're saying they feel unsafe and blah blah blah, and basically what happened is it got to a Republican who then brought some attention to it. So the thing was, the dispensary was quietly taken away. Quite hard to quietly take away a dispensary, I imagine, unless you have a very good screwdriver.
I like the idea that you tried and it just got a bit loud, so you left it.
Yeah. We did another ridiculous story, really. Let's do this one in the Telegraph. And a school has appointed an AI teacher. Have they run out of humans prepared to do the job, Leo?
Well, it could save the government some money, and it's from its teaching budget. So a prep school has appointed an AI chatbot as its principal head teacher. The robot will assist Tom Rogerson, the headmaster of Cottesmore, by giving him advice on a range of issues. So the technology works in a similar way to ChatGPT, the online AI service where users type questions and they're answered by the chatbot's algorithms. I'll go one further and say it is ChatGPT. I think it's basically, that's what it is, and you just type it. But the thing is, like we've seen with AI, it can be incredibly useful. I used it to try and gather some statistics, and it was just dishing me all kinds of nonsense, but in a very authoritative voice. But then when you actually went and checked to see what it was saying and validated it against actual data, it was making a lot of mistakes. So this worries me if he's going to be using it to guide his teaching.
If it comes up with rubbish but does it in an authoritative way, it could host some radio shows.
Yeah.
Some phone-ins work like that. It's a terrible idea because I'd like to remind you of the story of the guy who tried to get to the Queen with a crossbow. The story broke about him saying that AI told him to do it. There's a head teacher taking advice from the same machinery that tells people to head off with crossbows. This school is going to go badly.
I do like that the robot is assisting Tom Rogerson because he sounds exactly like an astronaut in a movie that would have a buddy robot, doesn't he? It's Tom Rogerson. Did you notice that? No. Nothing, guys. All right, well, that's all I had on that. Maybe we should move on and do the Observer. And employees are worried about calling out their bosses on climate issues in case they get victimised, which, let's face it, they probably should be, Steve.
This charity says fear of reprisals, it's been a long day, prevent people from calling out their employees. This is about whistleblowing. There's a charity that looks after whistleblowers called Protect. And they've looked into this after they noticed they were getting relatively few calls about environmental mishaps or problems with their companies. And they say it's because of fear of reprisal. Would you not be able to call these people anonymously? Every time I've dobbed this place into Ofcom, I've kept my name out of it. So that would be one way of looking at it. I mean, it's also the fear of not wanting to bite the hand that feeds you if you need that money. But they're looking into this, whether it does stop people noticing some environmental issue. You can also, as it says lower in the article, you can raise concerns directly with the UK's environmental regulators, although in 2022, 38 people did. So I'm surprised to find out that only 38 people work for our water firms.
Yeah, this is a very Guardian Observer type story. I mean, you've been hired in a job, they got over-regulated anyway, they're giving you money, and you're like, I tell you what I'm going to do, I'm going to get you done and get you and grass you up for not being grass-friendly enough, I guess. Go on.
Yeah, although, I mean, I'm reading it in The Guardian, it's about a charity. I'm amazed to be agreeing with what they're saying. We need to protect whistleblowers, starting with Julian Assange. But maybe, I don't know, maybe they could get a cut of the fine that's dished out. If you get 10% of that, like when you rescue a dog.
Is that how it works?
I don't know.
You get 10% of the dog?
What am I thinking of?
Like a reward.
A reward.
Like for a missing person.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you do. You see a cat on a lamppost, you find the cat, you get a reward. You're absolutely right, Leo. I was at fault there. Let's do the Telegraph. And finally, the dark truth about green juice, Leo.
So the truth about green juice and why it probably won't help you lose weight. I'm not directing that at you, Nick. Apparently, it is just as sugary as drinking fizzy pop, and it floods the liver with the equivalent of all the sugar that's in the stuff. So if you put 5 apples in a juice, then it floods your liver with all that sugar straight away. Instead of if you eat the apples, it goes slower. There's other bad stuff about juice. These people really don't like juice. They say when you go on a juice detox diet, because you're not getting any protein, because you're just eating the stupid juice. Unless you drink milk, which has got protein in it, it doesn't count as juice apparently. But because you're not getting protein, you lose muscle mass. Your body basically eats its own muscles. So yeah, that's
My little take on this is that some trainer was saying, people are saying things like, I grabbed a sandwich, but I had a juice. It's the modern day Big Mac with a Diet Coke, as if the drink is going to undo all the bad food.
Yeah.
Great point. I'm so glad Lewis wasn't here for that story. Thanks, guys. Great shows. Show's nearly over, though, so let's have another quick look at Sunday's front pages. So the Mail on Sunday has You Ghouls about the pro-Palestine march today. The Sunday Telegraph, Israel set to hit Hamas from land, sea and air. The Observer, Israel warns fleeing Gazans the next stage is coming. Sunday Express, PM, we stand by Israel always. The Sun on Sunday, Prem Ace secret sex party legal gag. And the Daily Star, of course, has Apocalypse Nout, which is something to do with zombies and the city of Leeds, but luckily we didn't cover that. That is it for tonight's show. Thanks to Leo and Steve. Headliners is back tomorrow at 11 p.m. Not quite sure who's on. I think Josh is on, so tune in for that. And if you're watching at 5 a.m, then stay tuned for breakfast. But for now, good night.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albie Amoncona, Emily Carver, Benjamin Butterworth and Alex Armstrong. Tonight on the show, the High Priestess of COVID has gone. Welcome, Conservatives in New Zealand.
It's time for Just Stop Oil to just shut up.
Jewish people must feel safe in Britain.
We must stop tax handouts for private schools. Is it game over for the SNP and Scottish independence?
We shall see. It's 8 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. Now, they do say that all good doctors recommend you get your 5 a day. And here we are for 2 whole hours again tonight. Albie and Emily are alongside me as usual, and we also welcome back the self-styled wokest man in Great Britain, Benjamin Butterworth. And our special guest tonight is Alex Armstrong.
Yes, as usual, in the first hour of this evening's show, each of us will get around 60 seconds to outline our argument of the day. Then the rest of us tell them what utter tosh they're talking. Then lots more fun in the second hour, including Bunch of Five and our brand spanking new feature, Flummox the 5. Yes, as well, your views on all of our topics tonight are always welcome. We want your questions too, which will all be read out live and unfiltered later in the show. Do you want to know if Albie Amenkona is looking to defect to the Labour Party? Does Darren Grimes wish he campaigned for Remain sometimes? And has Benjamin Butterworth ever worn an item of clothing less offensive than his views? You can ask us anything, however outrageous. Please do get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. We want your questions. But before we start tearing each other apart this evening, it is time for your Saturday Night News with Aaron.
Very good evening.